Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me tonight. I say tonight, I'm in Seattle, Washington, and it is right now about 9:30 p.m. here. I know that many of you are joining from other parts of the world, but thank you for being with me. My name is Lisa Hirayama, and I am the Assistant Director of International Student Admissions at Seattle Pacific University. So I'm going to spend a little time talking with you about some of the things to think about when you're looking at schools, at colleges and universities, trying to find the best fit for yourself, and then how to navigate the US college admissions process, which can be confusing. So let me share my screen with you here. Give me just a minute. And let's see. All right, so finding the right fit and navigating the US college admissions process. So in the United States, there are over 4,000 colleges and universities. That's wonderful. That gives students a lot of choices, but it also can make your job really challenging to try to sort through all those choices and figure out what's going to be the best place for you, the place where you're going to be happiest spending the next 4 years of your life. So before we talk about some of those things to think about, I want to just put out a couple of definitions because these are terms that we use in the U.S., but I think often have different meanings in other educational systems. So I want to just define these terms for you so you know what we're talking about in the U.S. when we use these terms. So first of all, the term college versus university. Um, in the US, when we talk about colleges, we are referring to after high school. So I know that in some educational systems, a college may be a term that's used for secondary school or some other purpose. But in the US, college and university both are terms that refer to after high school, post secondary. Typically, a school that is termed a college is typically smaller and is focused mostly on providing undergraduate or bachelor's level education. It may have some higher degrees available as well, but the main focus will be on undergraduate studies. A university, on the other hand, tends to be a larger school and typically includes all different levels of education, from bachelor's all the way up through PhD or doctoral level studies. In the US, though, we typically use the term college in sort of a generic way to refer to what you're doing after high school. So I would say, oh, my son is a college student. Even though the school he's going to may be X university, I would still say he's a college student or he's going to college. Um, so that's the term that we use most frequently, just in that generic kind of way. And then just to make things even more confusing and complicated, we have community colleges in the US. And a community college typically is a school that offers 2 year degree programs as well as some shorter term certificates. But the 2 year programs that they offer usually are in one of two tracks, either a technical sort of training program like a job training program where you're preparing for a very specific type of work, usually not intended to go on to a university, or community colleges also offer an academic transfer track. So a 2 year program that then transfers on to a bachelor's degree program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Um, it is kind of a trend in the US right now that a lot of the community colleges are dropping the word community from their name and just being called X college. So as you're looking at schools, If you are specifically looking for a 4-year bachelor's program and you're looking at schools that are called something college, be sure that what you're looking at is a school that's a 4-year bachelor's degree school and not a community college. Community colleges are doing this because some of them are starting to offer a very small number of 4-year bachelor's programs. Very often, the programs that they're offering are a little bit more technical in nature, but they still are bachelor's degrees. And so that is leading some of those community colleges to change their title, but that is making it more confusing. And then the terms public versus private, when we talk about higher ed in the US, public schools, or what we sometimes call state schools, those are schools that receive a lot of their funding from either the federal government or the state government of the state that they're located in. So for us here in Washington state, for example, our public universities receive a lot of their funding from the state of Washington as well as from the federal government. Private schools, on the other hand, um, do not receive any federal or state government funding. They cannot. And so they rely exclusively on student tuition and on private donations. So you do find that the tuition does tend to be higher at the private colleges and universities. And those schools typically do not differentiate between residents and non-residents the way the state or the public schools do, where the tuition at the public schools, students who are from that state will pay usually a lower rate of tuition because it's subsidized by the state and they're taxpayers in that state. But at the private schools, there's usually no difference in the tuition. Everyone pays the same amount. That tuition can be a bit higher than at the public schools, but private schools also tend to offer pretty significantly more generous scholarships. And so I always encourage students, don't discount um, private universities because the price tag may seem higher, but look at the scholarships that are offered and you may be pleasantly surprised. And then finally, I know that in some countries, private schools have maybe a reputation of being lesser quality or not as good as the public schools. In the US, it's really just the opposite. The reputation is that private schools tend to have a reputation of being a little bit higher quality, a better reputation. Not always the case, but that is kind of the overall reputation. Okay, so let's go on to some of the things that you might want to consider as you start looking at schools. And all of these things are really going to impact the kind of experience you're going to have at the college or university that you end up at. So I urge you to really think about these things. First of all, location. And kind of on a macro level, do you want to be in a more urban environment, a city type of setting? Do you want to be in small town America, maybe where the university is the whole center of the town, and it's just a very small town out in the middle of nowhere, or maybe something in between, maybe just outside of a large urban area, but with a bit more of a rural kind of feeling to it. There are all kinds of possibilities. So think about what's important to you, what kind of experience you want. And then again, what part of the country do you want to be in? You'll find schools in all of those settings, whether it's urban or rural or suburban, in every part of the country. But what part of the country do you want to be in? Because that's going to make a difference in your experience. Um, you can be in the middle of the country out in the Midwest, which is a lot of farm country. There are large cities in the Midwest, though, so it's not all farms. The Northeast, you could be in the desert Southwest, you could be in the mountains, you could be in a tropical location like Hawaii, for example. So all different parts of the country. Where do you want to spend some time? And choose your climate. We have it all in the US. So there are parts of the country where you will experience all four seasons, and the extremes from very hot summers to very cold and snowy winters and everything in between. Other parts of the country where it's a more tropical type of climate where the seasons don't really change very much. And then other parts like here in Seattle where we do have all four seasons, but it's a bit more moderate of a climate. So in the summer, for example, summers here are beautiful. They're warm, but they're not usually super hot. And our winters are cold, but we tend to get more rain than we do snow in the winters. It's not extremely cold and snowy here in Seattle. If it does snow, which is rare, the city's not prepared for it, so everything just sort of stops. So, what kind of climate are you interested in? You might be looking at something that's familiar to where you've grown up, or you might want to try something completely different. So, think about that. And then, of course, the size of the school is really important and will affect the experience that you have positively and negatively. There's pros and cons to both large and small schools. If you're at a small school, you're likely to have small classes, um, like the kind of setting that you see here, um, classes that are taught by full professors with a lot of interaction between the professor and the students. So if you're the type of student that likes to sit in the back of the room and sleep, this might not be the best kind of environment for you. On the other hand, if you're really looking forward to engaging your professors and having some discussions and getting to know them, and being known by them, a small school may be just what you're looking for. A large university, it would not be uncommon to have a class like you see here in the picture, particularly in first year introductory level courses. You might have 300 or 400 students in your class, and that class may not be taught by a full professor. It may be taught by a graduate student in the department, what we call TAs or teaching assistants. Um, on the other hand, it's easier to be more anonymous in a large class like that. So again, it depends on what you're looking for. And at a large university, you're going to have more choices in the majors that are offered, for example, in all the clubs and activities that are available, because it's a larger student population. So there's going to be more diversity there. But look at what's available at the different schools and think about the kind of experience that you want, and how that relates to the size of the school. Do you want to live on campus? What kind of living situation do you want? A lot of students assume that, particularly in their first year, they will live on campus in a dorm or a residence hall. And that very often is the case. Some schools will require that of you, that they'll require all first year students to live on campus, or maybe first and second year students. Other schools, particularly large universities, may not have enough on-campus housing for all of the first year students or for any student that wants to live on campus. And you may have to really apply early if you want to get on-campus housing. So you need to be aware of what's available and think about what's important to you. Some students, on the other hand, really don't want that residence hall on-campus living experience. They'd rather live off campus with their friends right from the start. At some schools, that's possible. Other schools, it might not be if they have an on-campus living requirement. So again, something to check into. Host families are another option that some international students particularly enjoy having at the beginning of their time in the US, or maybe during vacation periods. So if that's something you're interested in, see whether that's available at the schools you're looking at. And then campus life, every college and university has its own culture, its own traditions. There's a different feeling on every college campus. And that can be really challenging, especially when you're thousands of miles away, because the best way to get that feeling is to be able to visit the school. And for most international students, that's not going to be possible. And so, you're going to need to be creative and find other ways to get that sense, to find out what the campus culture is like. There's lots of ways to do that. Those of us in admissions really try to put materials on our website, um, help students make connections, whether it's with professors or current students, talk with you about kind of the campus experience that we offer and help you get that sense. But again, it's something to look at. You know, some schools, for example, have a reputation of being party schools, where students have pretty wild times during their weekends. Other schools might be more conservative and just the opposite. And there may be schools that have a real outdoor kind of athletic focus, and others that are really focused on music, for example. Um, Large universities, what we call the Big Ten schools that have a football culture, like you see a picture of Ohio State here. If that's something that excites you, then that might be something that you want to be part of. That's probably not something you're going to find at a small university or college. So again, think about what kind of campus culture you're looking for and what kinds of activities you want to be involved with. If you're a swimmer, for example, make sure that the school you're looking at has a pool or at least has a pool nearby. If you are a jazz musician, make sure that you're going to have an opportunity to be involved with that, because not every school is going to have every activity. Now, there are some schools in the US that have a special kind of affiliation or focus. And I just want you to be aware of some of those because they may appeal to you. So, first of all, there is an organization called the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, or the CCCU, and that is a collection of particularly Christian colleges and universities in this country, schools that either are connected with a particular Christian denomination or have a specific faith tradition. We also have what are called historically Black colleges and universities, where the student population is predominantly African American, and has been that way historically. We have schools in the US that are all women's colleges and universities. There were more back 50 or so years ago. A lot of those schools have become co-ed over the years, but there still are a number of schools that are all women's universities. And that can be a wonderful experience, empowering experience for women students. We have schools that are music conservatories that offer just music. We have art schools, we have design schools, sort of pre-professional training type of schools. So depending on what your interests are and what you're looking for, these may be the kinds of schools that you want to look at. Gallaudet University, I put a picture there. Gallaudet is a school for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Um, the majority of their students fall into that population, but there are hearing students at Gallaudet as well. Very often students that are interested in the deaf community, maybe in sign language interpretation, things like that. So that's a special school as well. So there are some of these kind of special affiliations that you might want to look into. Now, there are a couple of main pathways to a bachelor's degree. The most typical and traditional route is to go from high school directly to a four-year college or university. But the route through the community college system is an alternative that you might want to consider. We refer to that as the 2+2, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we mean by that. So what that means is that students can go from high school to a community college, spend 2 years at that community college. In those 2 years, you're typically taking the same kind of classes that you would take in your first 2 years at a university. So those tend to be general education courses, classes that you need to prepare for your major. So if you're planning to major in engineering, for example, you're going to need to take some math and some probably some chemistry, some physics, to get ready for that major. So those are the kinds of classes you typically take in your first 2 years, and those are available at the community colleges. So some students will choose to start at community college, spend 2 years there, maybe finish an associate's degree, a 2-year degree, and then transfer on to the university for the third and the fourth year of their bachelor program. So that's what we mean when we talk about 2+2, 2 years at each school. Some of the reasons that students typically will choose to start at a community college, first of all, are for students who speak English as a second language. Most of the community colleges do offer ESL classes. So if English is not your first language and maybe your English is not quite strong enough to meet the proficiency requirements at the universities you're looking at, community college gives you an opportunity to start with a combination of ESL and academic classes, and then transition out of ESL into a fully academic program. The tuition at community colleges also tends to be less than at the four-year schools, so it can be a good way to save some money. Um, Classes do tend to be small at the community colleges with a lot more personal attention, really similar to what you would find at a small private university. But particularly if you have your sights set on a large university, but you're a little hesitant about that experience, you might want to start at a community college with a smaller experience and then go on to your large university. The community colleges, as I said before, also offer training, technical training programs. So for students that want some job skills, but really are not looking to go on to a university, that can be a great option for you. And then finally, for students who maybe didn't do too well in high school and their grades are not strong enough to get them into their dream college or university, community college can give you an opportunity to sort of start over, prove yourself, do well in your 2 years at the community college, and then transfer on to that dream school. Another thing that's important to look at is whether the universities that you're looking at offer the major that you think you want. You cannot assume that every college and university offers every major. So be careful about this. Business, for example, business is a very common major. Probably the majority of universities do offer a business administration major, but there are many universities that don't. So you can't assume that everything will be available everywhere. So make sure that the schools you're looking at have what you want. And then another thing that more and more students are looking at these days, particularly as the job market is becoming more and more competitive, is whether the university offers opportunities for you to make those connections between what you're learning in your classes and the real world of work, in terms of internships, and other career related experiences like that. So if that's important to you, that's something to look into, to see what's available. Some of that can be determined by the type of location that the school is in, but some of it is just how much emphasis the school places on that, and how many services they provide related to careers. So something to think about. Now, just to talk for a couple minutes about the overall admissions process at US colleges and universities. The first thing I encourage you to do is to be aware of just the overall structure. Every school is going to have its own process, its own requirements. There are some commonalities, but there are some differences too. So you cannot assume that the requirements at one school are going to be the same everywhere. So first of all, be sure that you look at when are the application deadlines, what are the important dates, what are the intake dates. Some schools will only bring new students in once a year. Others might take them in at every term throughout the year. So what are the opportunities at the schools you're looking at? Does the school follow a quarter system, a semester system? Those are the two most common. There are some schools that maybe use a trimester, but most typically schools will be semester system schools where there's 2 terms a year, fall semester, spring semester, and then usually a summer vacation period. In my part of the country, here in the Northwest, our more common structure is a quarter system. So my university, for example, we're on a quarter system, so there are 4 terms each year. Most students go to school during the 3 main quarters of the year. So that's fall, winter, and spring. And then summer quarter, they take off as vacation, although there are some limited numbers of classes offered in the summer as well. And we take new students in each of those quarters. So at my school, you could start in the fall or the winter or the spring. So be aware of what the system is that your schools are on. Early decision and early action. Those may be terms that you've heard, and be sure you understand the difference. So early decision is a process where you can apply to a number of schools, but if you have one school in your mind that is your dream school, you know that is where you want to be above any other school, then you might want to apply early decision to that school. Um, that early decision application is a binding application. So that means that if you apply early decision to a school and they offer you admission, you are obligated to accept that admission. And part of the deal is that you will cancel your application to other universities. So that is early decision. Not every school offers that, but many do. So again, for students that really know exactly what school they want to be at, that's a great opportunity to get that locked in and done early, and then you know where you're going. Early action, on the other hand, is something that a lot of schools do offer as well, but that is not a binding decision. So early action gives you the opportunity to apply on the earlier end and get an earlier decision. Sometimes there are other benefits with early action, like they may offer no application fee to students that apply early action. They may offer earlier class registration, something like that. So there are occasionally some advantages to early action, but again, that's not a binding decision. Um, be aware of the scholarship opportunities that exist at the schools you're looking at. What are the requirements for those scholarships? What's available? What do you need to do? Do you need to apply separately for them? Is every student automatically considered for scholarships? Be sure you know what's available and what you need to do to get those scholarships. And then applicant portals. More and more schools these days are using what we call a student portal or an applicant portal. And that's just an electronic space for where we keep track of your admission materials. And so you will basically start an account with us when you apply. And then in your portal, you'll be able to see what materials we've received, what's still missing. Usually decisions these days are being released through the applicant portal. And then for students who are admitted, then you'll usually find a checklist of next steps to take. So become familiar with that portal and check it frequently. And then number 2 here, does the school do rolling admission or traditional admissions? So in the traditional admission system, that's what probably the very prestigious super elite schools in the US will follow a traditional admission system, and many other schools as well. But that's a system where there is a deadline, an application deadline. If you do not meet that deadline, there's usually no flexibility to apply late. And the universities will not look at applications before that deadline. So they will wait until the deadline comes. Then they will review all of the applications and they will choose the students that they want from that total applicant pool. So that's kind of the traditional admission system that many schools still use. Um, Many schools, though, also use what we call rolling admissions. My cat is here to say hello to you. And rolling admissions means that the sooner you apply, the sooner you will get a decision. And the universities will look at applications on a rolling basis as the files become complete. So there is an advantage to applying early because often you'll get an earlier decision. Sometimes in rolling admissions, um, there may be limited amounts of scholarship money, so the earlier you apply, the better chance you have of getting scholarships. So there can be some differences there, but that's what rolling admissions means. It means that there's usually a deadline or a suggested deadline, but you can apply anytime up until that deadline, and the school is not going to wait until after the deadline to give you a decision. Usually you'll get that decision within a few weeks after your file is complete. So then number three, it's important to look at what materials are required. Every school is going to be a little different. So what application do you need to give them? Do they use what's called the common application, which is shared by many schools? Do they have their own application? What essays are involved? Um, every school is going to require transcripts, of course, your high school transcripts, but do they want the official version or will they accept just a copy from you? Test scores, do they require SAT or ACT test scores? Do they require English proficiency tests? And then letters of recommendation. Those very often are required. Sometimes they're optional and sometimes they're just not required or even looked at. So it's important to know if you need letters of recommendation and who they should come from. And then some schools even will require or strongly suggest an interview of some sort. And that interview can be on campus with an admissions representative, or it might be done in your hometown with an alumni of the school. So sometimes interviews are either required, strongly suggested, or at least available. I always encourage you to look for those visit opportunities. Of course, if you're able to visit the school in person, that's fantastic. But if not, look for opportunities to visit virtually. More and more schools, especially right now during this COVID pandemic, have been putting a lot of resources online for students to get a feeling for the physical space of the campus. Virtual tours, I know at my school, we're doing twice a week live tours with some of our current students on Instagram where they'll walk around campus and show you different things. So look for those kinds of opportunities, again, to get a sense of what the school feels like. And then be aware that in the US, we have what we call National Decision Day, which is May 1st every year. And that is the date that the colleges and universities will ask you to make your decision, usually by submitting an advanced deposit of some sort. But that's the date that we ask you to let us know if you're coming or if you're not coming. So that's an exciting day for everyone, for students to make that commitment, and then for the schools also to see who's coming, who will be making up their new class. Throughout this process, it's really important that you do your best to put your best foot forward. You want to present yourself in the best possible light in the application process. And there's a few ways to do that. So first of all, I always encourage students to participate in your school community, but also in your surrounding community. That's something we really look at in admissions offices at the colleges and universities in the US. We want, of course, students who are good students who've been focused on their academics, but we also look at what else makes you special, what else makes you unique and makes you you. So tell us. This is not your time to be shy or hesitant or humble. This is your opportunity to brag about yourself. So you might even want to start ahead of time making a list, maybe during your junior year or the summer before your senior year. Make yourself a list of all the activities, all the volunteer opportunities you've taken advantage of, all the things that you've done throughout your high school career, paid work, just hobbies or special interests that you've pursued. Make yourself a list so you'll be ready to list all of those things on your college applications. It's really important that you do that. I sometimes read applications of students who put nothing in the section on activities. Um, and I have a feeling that they probably did something, but I don't know what it is that they did. Sometimes even their high school counselor will mention some of the ways they've been involved in the school, but the student didn't tell me. And so be sure that you do that. We like to hear those things about you, and that can really make a difference. When we're looking at applications from a lot of great students, that's when we start looking at what else is there about you that makes you special. Um, Start early. I put that in red because it's so important, especially for schools that have early deadlines. You know, it's not uncommon for schools to have deadlines in November of the year before you're planning to start. So right at the beginning almost of your final year of high school, November of that year, you may have application deadlines for the following September. So be sure that you start early. And I'm not going to go through each of the things on the list here, but another important one is ask us for what you need. So in admissions, we're here to help you. We want to do whatever we can to give you a good sense of what our school is like and what your experience would be like as a student at our school. We don't want to bring you to our school and have you be unhappy or have it not meet your expectations. So ask us for what you need. If you're looking at a particular department and you want some more information, we can connect you with a faculty person in that department. We could connect you with a current student who is studying in that department. We could connect you with a student from your own country, if that would be of interest to you, to find out what their experience has been like. If you are able to come visit and you'd like to have dinner in our cafeteria, or you'd like to stay overnight in a residence hall, those are all things that admissions office typically will offer. So don't hesitate to ask us for what you need and what would be helpful for you. That's why we're here. Um, and finally, proofread. It's really important. I read a lot of applications that have just little errors, little silly errors that would easily have been caught if the student had proofread. Um, and the most common one that I see is students who, in their essay, for example, are cutting and pasting. And we know that you're going to do that. You're going to try to use the same essay and for different schools. But when you do that, be sure you change the name of the school that you're talking about in your essay. I read a lot of applications where the student didn't do that, and they tell me all about why they want to go to such and such university, and it's not my university. So be sure that you proofread. All right, now before you go, I just want to spend a really quick couple minutes introducing you to Seattle Pacific University because I'm proud to represent that school, and just as an example of one of the schools you might think about. So Seattle Pacific is located in Seattle. We're in the Pacific Northwest part of the US, about 2.5 hours drive up to the Canadian border, and then about another 30 minutes beyond that up to Vancouver, Canada. So that's the closest Canadian city to us. And then to the south, Portland, Oregon is the next big city. Again, about a 3-hour drive down to Portland. Seattle has been given lots of nicknames that you see here, like #1 best city for young professionals in America, second healthiest city in the US, one of the best places to live in the US. So Seattle's a pretty popular place to be. We have people moving into this area from all over the country. We have a booming economy in Seattle. So it's a pretty exciting and wonderful place to be these days. And this is Seattle. If you haven't been here before, this is what the city looks like. You can see that we're surrounded by water, and then there are two mountain ranges on either side of the city, to the east and to the west. The hill that you see in the foreground of this picture is the hill where my university is located. So Seattle Pacific is on this hill just out of the picture. But our university is located in a residential neighborhood, really pretty, nice, peaceful area, but just about a 10-minute bus ride into the middle of that downtown Seattle core. And you can see Mount Rainier off there in the distance. It's a beautiful part of the country. Just some quick facts about SPU. We were founded about 130 years ago. Seattle Pacific is a Christian university. We are connected, affiliated with the Free Methodist Church, but we welcome students who are Christian, who are from other faith backgrounds and no particular faith background. Everybody's welcome. We are a fairly small private university, about 2,700 undergraduate students, and then about 850 in our graduate programs. And kind of your typical small university campus. Average class size is about 21 students. So there's a very strong community feeling at SPU, and it's the kind of school where students and professors have a lot of opportunity for interactions and really to get to know each other and establish really lifelong connections in that way. 6% of our student body are international students, but and those are students that are in the country on a student visa. But in addition to those students, we have a lot of students who maybe are US citizens that have grown up in other countries. So some of you listening tonight may be in that sort of category. So it's quite a diverse and international student population on our campus. We offer 71 different majors, and the majority of those also offer a minor option within their department. And then these are some of the companies that you'll find here in Seattle. A lot of the companies on the screen here are companies that were founded in Seattle and still maintain their headquarters here. So companies like Boeing, Costco, Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, those are all Seattle born and raised companies. The others that you see like Facebook, Walt Disney, those were not started in Seattle, but they have a large presence here in Seattle. So these companies and many others have our alumni working in them, offer our students opportunities for internships, for mentorships. That is something that SPU really takes seriously and provides a lot of resources for our students, is connections with the working world that is surrounding us here in Seattle. So if you'd like more information about Seattle Pacific, here's our website. I hope that you'll visit. And if I can help with anything ever, here's my contact information. Again, my name is Lisa Hirayama, and my email address is just international@spu.edu. I hope that you'll let me know if you, of course, if you have questions about SPU, but if you just have questions about anything related to the admissions process, to colleges and universities in the US, I would be happy to help you anytime. So feel free to contact me. And in closing, I wish you the best of luck. It's an exciting time. Enjoy it, and good luck to you. Thanks for joining me.